The sound of crystal exploding under my ribs should have terrified me, but what froze me in place was the look on my sister's face as she shoved me from behind, bright, manic, triumphant. One moment, I was sitting at the long mahogany table beneath a canopy of twinkling garlands. The next, I was flying forward, weightless, helpless, my palms scraping through broken glass as a $10,000 Waterford candle set toppled with me. The Christmas music cut off mid-chorus. Guests gasped. My breath hitched in my throat as wax and wine soaked into my dress, my wheelchair spinning out behind me like a fallen shadow. "Stop pretending," Alyssa hissed loud enough for the 50 guests to hear. "You're embarrassing all of us." I stared up from the floor chest, heaving legs limp and useless, my vision swimming with candlelight and horror. But what pierced me far worse than the glass was the silence, my parents' silence, as they watched their eldest daughter lying in a glittering field of blood and crystal. And in the blur of stunned faces, I caught the smallest movement behind Alyssa, someone pulling out their phone and dialing 911 without hesitation, before anyone else even breathed. In that moment, as the cold tile bit into my skin, I knew this couldn't be buried. Not this time. Not with witnesses, not with shattered luxury glittering at my feet. Something had broken tonight, and it wasn't just the crystal. I tried to push myself up, hands trembling, but pain shot up my arms. The room tilted, voices blending into murmurs of shock and confusion. Guests hovered in place, unsure whether to help or pretend they hadn't seen what was right in front of them. The scent of roasted pine and cinnamon clung to the air, suddenly nauseating. My ribs throbbed, my neck stiffened, and I tasted metal at the back of my tongue. Alyssa bent down just enough for her voice to reach me, her smile sugar-sweet for the crowd. "Everyone saw you slip, Evelyn. Don't make a scene." Slip. She'd planned her script before my body even hit the floor. My mother pressed a hand to her pearl's eyes, darting between the stunned guests, and my wheelchair tipped on its side like a dead animal. She didn't move toward me. Neither did my father. He stared at the spilled wine as if calculating the cost of the linens beneath it. Shame bloomed hot beneath my skin. Shame I didn't earn, shame they taught me to carry for them. Someone whispered, "I thought she couldn't walk," and another murmured, "Her sister said she exaggerates it." The words floated down like snowfall, cold and cutting. Alyssa smoothed her perfect red dress, adjusting a lock of hair that had fallen from her immaculate curls. Even in the aftermath of violence, she posed. "Let's all calm down," she cooed. "It's Christmas." Evelyn gets overwhelmed sometimes. Overwhelmed. As if paralysis were an emotion I chose. Pain spiked through my wrists as I shifted, trying to get onto my side. I could feel wax hardening on my dress, sticking to my skin. The world swayed again. Someone finally stepped forward to help a stranger, a man I didn't recognize. But before he could touch me, another voice cut through the room. "Don't move her." It came from near the tree, firm and controlled. A tall man in a charcoal suit pushed past a cluster of stunned guests, eyes locked on me with sharp, assessing focus. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't uncertain. He had seen everything. My heart stuttered. Alyssa's smile faltered when she noticed him. "Rowan, she's fine. She's dramatic when—" He knelt beside me, ignoring her completely. "Evelyn, can you hear me?" His tone was soft but authoritative, the kind of voice people obeyed without thinking. He didn't touch me yet. He waited for my nod, waited for my permission, something no one in my family had ever bothered with. I swallowed, nodding slightly. "Good. Stay as still as you can. Help is already on the way." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Alyssa's eyes widened, not with concern for me, but with panic for herself. She turned toward our parents, silently begging them to intervene. They didn't. They just looked trapped, like actors unable to remember their lines. The man Rowan gently brushed a piece of glass from my shoulder without shifting my spine. "You're safe," he murmured, and something inside me cracked. Safe. I couldn't remember the last time someone used that word about me. Alyssa's face hardened. "You don't need to involve paramedics," she snapped. "She's exaggerating. She always does." Rowan looked up slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "She was assaulted," he said. "And I witnessed it." A tremor went through the crowd. Alyssa stepped back, breath-hitching mascara trembling at the edges of her eyes. She hadn't expected anyone to challenge her. She never did. The sirens grew louder. Guests shifted uneasily. My parents stood frozen, fear or guilt tightening their expressions. As the distant flashing lights filled the windows, I realized something with startling clarity. This wasn't the night my life shattered. That had happened long before. No, this was the night the world finally saw it happen. And this time I wasn't going to disappear into silence. A cold ripple of pain ran down my spine as I lay there on the tile sirens edging closer through the winter air. The Christmas lights overhead shimmered in distorted halos, while the guests remained frozen, suspended between politeness and horror. My breath came in shallow, uneven pulls. I could feel the glass embedded in my palms, the sticky mix of wax and wine seeping deeper into the fabric of my dress. But the sharpest ache came from watching my mother straighten a napkin instead of coming to me and my father quietly urging the nearest waiter to clean the mess before the investors noticed. Rowan stayed kneeling beside me, steady and unmoving as if he were the only real thing in the room. "You're doing fine," he murmured. "Just breathe slow." His presence alone forced people to step back, giving me space I didn't know I was allowed to claim. Alyssa's voice slithered in from the foot of the table. "Honestly, Evelyn, if you didn't want to sit at the front, you could have said something. Throwing yourself into the candles is a bit dramatic." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. One woman let out a tiny gasp. A man near her whispered, "Is she serious?" The comment wasn't meant for me, but it floated to my ears anyway, a small anchor in the chaos. I tried to lift my head, but pain jolted behind my eyes. Rowan held up a hand gently. "Don't move. Let the paramedics stabilize you first." My parents finally approached, but their steps were hesitant, almost resentful. My mother crouched just close enough for appearances, careful not to let her dress touch the spilled wax. "Sweetheart, why didn't you ask someone to help you sit? You know how unsteady you can be." Her voice was honeyed for the crowd, but her eyes sharpened with a warning. I'd known all my life. "Don't contradict me." My father crossed his arms behind her. "This is exactly why we suggested you sit toward the back. You always insist on being in the middle of things." I blinked at them, disbelief prickling my skin. They were rewriting the moment as it unfolded right in front of 50 witnesses. It should have surprised me, but it didn't. Rowan straightened. Her injury wasn't caused by a slip. I saw my father cut him off. "Sir, with all due respect, this is a private family matter." "No," Rowan said calmly. "It isn't." A beat of silence spread through the room like a crack in glass. Alyssa's face drained of its festive glow. Before anyone could respond, the front doors burst open and paramedics rushed in, snow-laced air swirling around them like a gust of reality. The room snapped into motion. A few guests stepped away. Others leaned in for a better look, curiosity overriding discomfort. One paramedic knelt beside me. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" I opened my mouth, but my mother's hand tightened around mine. Not comforting, restricting. She slipped, she answered quickly. The floor was wet from the champagne fountain. The paramedic ignored her and looked at me again. "Ma'am?" I hesitated only a second, long enough to feel the familiar weight of obligation pressing on my chest. Then Rowan's voice anchored me. "You can answer for yourself." My throat tightened. My sister pushed me. Gasps echoed. Alyssa's eyes went wide like a mask cracking. "You liar." Rowan didn't flinch. I witnessed the shove. The paramedic nodded sharply to his partner. Neck brace, backboard, possible spinal trauma. My mother's face blanched as they began to position the brace around my neck. Is that truly necessary? She's fragile, yes, but she tends to overreact. The paramedic finally met her gaze. Ma'am, she has a T10 spinal injury. Any fall is serious. Please step aside. He said it with the respect due to a stranger, not the reverence my mother demanded. She recoiled as if slapped. Alyssa paced in small circles, her hands twitching. She glanced toward our father, silently begging for intervention. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched, calculating. Always calculating. As the paramedics rolled me onto the backboard, pain flared up my ribs. I swallowed a cry. Rowan stepped closer. Voice a low murmur just for me. You're safe. They'll take good care of you. I'll follow the ambulance. But something else caught my attention, a whisper from two guests near the fireplace. Alyssa told us she fakes the paralysis sometimes. What Jesus? Maybe she pushed her for real. Their words sliced through me. Alyssa hadn't just attacked me tonight. She'd spent the entire evening poisoning the air with lies, preloading doubt, crafting her alibi. No wonder some guests looked at me with suspicion instead of concern. As the paramedics lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught sight of my wheelchair tipped behind the table. My black carbon fiber Freedom disregarded like clutter in a room too pretty to allow imperfections. Alyssa suddenly stepped into the paramedics' path, blocking them. Wait. You can't take her yet. She's fine. She can tell you herself. Rowan's voice cut in sharp as ice. Alyssa, step aside. Now. She hesitated, the first crack of uncertainty flickering across her face. Then a flash of blue strobed through the window's police lights arriving. Alyssa's breath hitched. Oh, God. When the stretcher rolled toward the front door, I met her eyes. For the first time I saw fear, not for me, but for herself. For the story she'd tried to spin unraveling in a room full of witnesses. The cold night air hit my skin like a cleansing shock as they guided me outside. Snowflakes drifted into my hair, melting instantly. As the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance, one thought settled through the haze of pain and humiliation. They finally saw it. All of them. The truth I'd been carrying alone for far too long, and this time I wasn't going to let it go. The ambulance doors slammed behind me, sealing out the cold and the chaos, and suddenly the world shrank to the narrow interior filled with antiseptic and flashing monitors. The paramedic tightened the straps across my shoulders and hips, careful not to jostle my spine. Every bump in the road sent a ripple through my ribs, but the pain felt distant, dulled by shock, and something heavier sitting behind my sternum. I stared up at the ceiling, listening to the sirens rise and fall, its rhythm steady and relentless, like a truth finally forcing itself into daylight. Rowan rode in the front, visible through the small square window between the compartments. His silhouette was rigid, his head tilted as if replaying everything he witnessed. The paramedic beside me kept his tone gentle. What you're feeling is normal. Try to take slow breaths. We'll run imaging as soon as we arrive. Normal. Nothing about any of this was normal. Not being shoved, not lying in front of 50 people while my parents stood frozen, not having a stranger defend me with more urgency than my own family ever had. The ambulance hit a small pothole, and another jolt shot up my spine. My breath hissed out. The paramedic adjusted my brace. Almost there. I closed my eyes. Behind them, scenes replayed like cruel ornaments hung on the tree of my memory. Alyssa's smirk, my father's glare, my mother's frantic attempt to smooth the tablecloth around the spilled wax instead of touching me, and worst of all, the whispers Alyssa had planted in the hours before the incident, faking it, exaggerating, doing it for pity. Had she really been telling guests I pretended to be paralyzed? The cruelty was almost impressive in its depth. Not random, not impulsive. Something older, something sharpened over time. When the ambulance stopped, the back doors swung open, letting in cold air and bright hospital lights. Rowan appeared, immediately stepping backward to make space for the stretcher. His expression was focused, but his eyes softened when they met mine. You're safe, he said again, and for a moment I wanted to believe him. Inside, the emergency team moved with quiet efficiency. Questions came rapidly: pain level, recent symptoms, medications, and I answered mechanically while they transferred me onto a padded table. My palms stung sharply as they removed the glass embedded in my skin. I tried not to cry out, but one involuntary sound escaped. Rowan's jaw tightened. They wheeled me into radiology, and as the doors closed on him, standing in the hallway, I felt an unexpected pang of fear. Not fear of the scans or the pain, but fear of being alone again. Alone with the truth that had lived in the shadows of my family for too long. The MRI machine hummed around me, enclosing me in a cold metallic cocoon. With nothing to focus on but the mechanical thrum, my mind wandered where it didn't want to go back to earlier that evening. My mother's request. "Let us decorate your wheelchair," just to match the theme. My father's warning. "Don't make things difficult tonight." Alyssa's whisper as she passed me at the entrance. "Try not to ruin Christmas." I'd dismissed them all as the usual digs and demands. But now, lying still beneath the machine's rhythmic pounding, a single truth settled into place tonight wasn't spontaneous. It had been building, a perfect storm of resentment, pressure, and image control. When they rolled me back out, Rowan was waiting beside the door. He stepped forward immediately. "Your scans are being reviewed. They'll know more soon." I nodded. My voice felt trapped somewhere below my ribs. He walked beside my stretcher as they moved me into a private observation room. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "I know this isn't easy, but I want you to know I saw what happened. All of it. You didn't imagine anything." Something in me cracked at those words. "People think I exaggerate," I whispered. "Even when I tell the truth, it sounds like a dramatization to them." Rowan's expression darkened. "That's because someone, maybe more than one person, has spent a long time shaping the story people believe about you." My throat tightened. "You don't even know my family." "No," he said, "but I know what a controlled narrative looks like. And tonight, I watched someone try to control yours." Before I could respond, the doctor entered with preliminary results. No new spinal fractures, severe bruising, lacerations, possible concussion. Relief washed through me, but it was tempered by something else: anger. Because while my body had survived, my dignity had been shredded and tossed across a Christmas table like broken ornaments. The doctor left. Rowan stayed. I finally asked the question, clawing at my chest. "Did you hear what Alyssa told people about me?" He hesitated. That alone was answer enough. "She told them," he said slowly, "that you exaggerate your symptoms, that sometimes you use the chair because you prefer the attention. She said the accident wasn't as bad as, well, as bad as reality." My breath escaped in a ragged exhale. Shame and fury tangled in my stomach. And people believed her. "They won't anymore," Rowan said. "Not after tonight." But I wasn't so sure. Stories, real or false, had a way of sinking their roots before anyone noticed. The nurse entered to adjust my IV. Rowan stepped back, but stayed within reach. I watched the door, half expecting my parents to barrel in with the force of a storm front, ready to rewrite everything. Instead, there was only Rowan, the hum of hospital machines, and the cold void where my family's protection should have been. "Try to rest," he said gently. I closed my eyes, but rest didn't come. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fearing what would happen if I spoke the truth. I was fearing what would happen if I didn't. The Christmas dinner had begun hours earlier under warm lights and soft carols, but even then something in the air felt brittle, like the whole evening was stretched too tight and would snap if anyone breathed wrong. I felt it the moment we arrived at the Hart estate, with its wreath-heavy railings and garlands dripping in gold. My parents liked to pretend the annual dinner was a beloved tradition, but in truth it had become a performance, a way to parade stability in front of investors and extended family. I'd been summoned like another prop in the display. Mother intercepted me immediately, pulling me aside before I even rolled past the foyer. "Evelyn, sweetheart, please try to smile tonight. People are watching, and try not to make any sudden movements in the chair, it draws the eye." She said it the way someone might say, "Don't spill wine on the couch." I forced a tight smile. "I'll try my best not to move while existing." She didn't catch the sarcasm. She rarely did. Music floated through the grand hall as guests mingled, laughing and clinking their champagne flutes. The Hart estate was at its most polished, towering trees, wrapped in blue lights, snow-dusted windows, the smell of cedar and cloves drifting from every corner. And beneath all of that beauty, I felt an undercurrent of worry weaving through my parents' movements. They kept glancing toward the dining room, toward the cluster of men in tailored suits near the fireplace. Investors, the Mallorys in particular, the people they needed to impress tonight more than anyone else. Father had been whispering with one of them earlier, his voice urgent but low. Words like audit and deadline floated through the air. At the time, I didn't understand the weight behind them. Not yet. I maneuvered through the decorated hall alone until I passed Father's partially open study. A red folder sat on the desk, its tab labeled in heavy black ink, "Insurance Claim Review, Vehicle Collision." My chest tightened. Why would he be revisiting the accident nearly 2 years later? Before I could wheel closer, one of the serving staff rushed over and shut the door with a startled apology. "So sorry, Miss Evelyn. The family requested privacy in there. Requested privacy from me." I backed away uneasy. Guests began gathering for photos near the fireplace. Alyssa materialized like a snow globe princess, flawless in crimson velvet and diamonds that caught every glint of candlelight. "Family picture," she announced, her voice bright and brittle. I dreaded it the moment she gestured toward a step I could not climb. I rolled toward the group anyway, determined not to give her ammunition. She stepped in front of me just as I reached the edge of the frame and tugged a decorative table between my chair and the others. "Oops." "Composition," she said with a smile so sharp it could have sliced the ribbon on a gift box. I stared at her. She stared right back, triumphant. Before I could say a word, Rowan stepped forward from beside the tree. His brow creased slightly, he'd seen the entire maneuver. Without hesitation, he moved the table aside. "Here," he said quietly. "You should be in the photo." Alyssa's smile faltered. "Thank you," I murmured. Her jaw tightened. "We don't want the shot cluttered," she snapped under her breath, the sweetness draining from her tone. Rowan looked at her calmly. "She's family. She belongs in the picture." A murmur ran through nearby guests. They noticed the tension. Alyssa's eyes flicked from Rowan back to me, simmering with something darker than annoyance. "Be careful around your sister," she whispered as she stepped away, her voice silk stretched too thin. Dinner began shortly after the Mallorys taking their seats at the center of the long table. Father hovered near them like a satellite afraid to drift too far. Every word he spoke sounded like an offering. Mother kept sneaking glances at me as though praying I wouldn't speak out of turn. At one point, Mr. Mallory asked me kindly, "How has your recovery been? I heard you've been doing therapy." I opened my mouth to answer, but Alyssa's tinkling laugh cut across mine. "Oh, she's improving when she wants to. Some days she forgets she can't walk." The table fell silent. Conversation died like a blown-out candle. My face burned. That's not Mother's foot nudged mine beneath the table, a familiar warning. Don't create tension. I swallowed the truth again. When I went to leave the table and wheel toward the restroom, Alyssa passed behind me and bumped the back of my chair, hard enough to jolt my torso and force me to grab the armrests. "Oops," she purred, not bothering to hide the malice. A guest near us, the wife of one of the investors, noticed. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. Later, as the dinner plates were being cleared, Alyssa cornered me in the narrow hallway leading back toward the dining room. Her face was flushed, her eyes frantic with the same strained brightness she'd been wearing all night. "You need to stop making everything about you," she hissed. "This night is important. Don't ruin it." "I haven't done anything," I replied quietly. She leaned closer, breath warm and sharp with champagne. "If you won't stand on your own 2 feet, I'll make you." My skin prickled. I tried to wheel back, but she blocked me with her body, her hands gripping the armrest of my chair. For a heartbeat, her expression cracked, the perfect daughter unraveling. Then voices approached. She stepped away instantly, mask restored. By the time we returned to the dining room, dessert had been placed, guests were laughing again, and the Waterford candle display glowed like a crown at the center of the table. Alyssa placed her hands on the handles of my chair and angled me closer to the display, far closer than I should have been. "Don't move," she whispered. Something in her tone chilled me. She wanted an audience. She wanted impact. She wanted to humiliate me in the most dramatic way possible. I didn't understand it then. I didn't know how far she was willing to go. Not until she did it. The moment my body hit the tile, the world dissolved into noise, and light shattering glass gasps the high-pitched ringing that comes with sudden terror. I couldn't tell where the cuts ended and the burning began. My hands throbbed as tiny shards embedded deeper with every twitch. Wax pooled beneath my shoulder blades, cooling fast. I tried to breathe through the pain, but the humiliation in the room was sharper than any broken crystal. Alyssa's voice cut through the chaos first. She slipped calm down everyone she slipped. Her tone was theatrical, smooth, eager to reclaim control. Even lying face down, I could hear the desperation behind it. A few guests edged forward uncertainly, hovering a foot from me as though waiting for permission to be human. Others whispered behind manicured hands. My mother stood frozen, clutching her linen napkin like a lifeline, while my father shot me a warning look, one that begged me not to make things worse for him. Then Rowan stepped into my line of vision, blocking out the overhead light. His expression was calm but fierce, his posture protective in a way I didn't understand. He knelt beside me without hesitation. "Evelyn, don't move." "I'm right here," he said softly, the steadiness in his voice anchoring me. I felt the first wave of real safety since the fall. Alyssa snapped Rowan's stop. "She's fine. She does this." "I saw you shove her," he said sharply, not raising his voice but slicing through hers cleanly. "Do not speak." The room went silent. A ripple moved through the guests, curiosity shifting into something heavier. Fear, recognition. I wasn't sure. Before anyone could respond, the distant sirens grew louder. Alyssa paled. Her hand fluttered toward her hair, smoothing a curl as though that might fix everything. "You called 911!" she barked toward Rowan, disbelief cracking her voice. "No," he replied. "Someone behind you did. Someone who understands what assault looks like." The color drained from her face. 2 paramedics burst through the front door, guided by staff. Their entry forced the truth into the open. The moment they saw me lying surrounded by broken crystal and wax, their expressions hardened. "Ma'am," one said, kneeling, "don't try to move. We'll stabilize your spine." My mother stepped forward abruptly. She slipped, she insisted. "She's dramatic when overwhelmed." The paramedic didn't even look at her. "We'll assess that ourselves." They began fitting a brace around my neck. Pain shot through me as they lifted my shoulders slightly. I winced, unable to hide it. My father pinched the bridge of his nose and whispered furiously, "Sweetheart, please don't exaggerate. The Mallorys are here." My stomach twisted. Rowan stood at the head of the stretcher, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Stop talking to her like she owes you silence," he said coldly. "She's injured." A murmur rose among the guests. A server approached timidly. Excuse me." Her voice trembled. I saw her shove Evelyn. It wasn't an accident. Alyssa spun on her. "You little liar!" But her outburst only confirmed what the server had said. More guests started whispering. I saw something too. It looked deliberate. She fell so hard. The perfect Christmas tableau Alyssa had engineered, her candlelit masterpiece, was collapsing around her. As the paramedics lifted me onto the stretcher, the sharp sting of embedded glass flared again. I clenched my jaw until the wave passed. Rowan stayed beside the stretcher, his hand hovering near mine without touching, offering presence instead of pity. Alyssa rushed forward suddenly, trying to insert herself between the stretcher and the door. "Wait. You can't take her. She's overreacting." One paramedic held up a hand firm. "Ma'am, step aside." "She's lying," Alyssa cried. "She just wants attention." Her voice cracked. It was the first sign she realized the narrative she built was slipping out of her hands. Then blue and red lights flooded the doorway as 2 police officers entered. Alyssa's breath hitched. My mother let out a tiny strangled sound. My father went stone still. The female officer scanned the room, then looked at the mess of glass, the destruction, the blood. "Who is the victim?" she asked. Rowan pointed toward me. "Evelyn Hart, and the assailant." He didn't look away from Alyssa. Her sister. A shocked gasp echoed from several corners of the room. Alyssa stumbled back. "That's insane. It was an accident." The officer stepped toward her. "Ma'am, we'll speak with you separately." As the stretcher rolled past my family, my mother finally reached out, but not to comfort me. She touched my arm lightly and whispered, "Don't say anything. Please, we can fix this." I stared at her, stunned by the gall, by the audacity to frame my survival as a burden and inconvenience. Rowan leaned down as the paramedics guided me out the door. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. Snowflakes drifted through the air as they loaded me into the ambulance. The cold bit at my cheeks, but I welcomed it. It felt honest. Through the narrow window, I saw Alyssa standing frozen beside the ruined dinner table, her perfect evening collapsing in shards around her. My parents hovered behind her like ghosts tethered to a lie. As the doors closed and the ambulance pulled away, one truth settled deep in my bones. This was no longer just a fall. This was the beginning of everything they had tried to bury, finally clawing its way to the surface. I woke to the soft beep of a monitor and the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. For a moment, I didn't know where I was or why the air smelled so clean, so sharp, so cold. Then the ache in my ribs surged, and memory came crashing back, the shove, the glass, the sirens, Alyssa's voice slicing through the chaos like a blade. My throat tightened. I tried to shift, but a brace hugged my neck and a weight pressed across my hips. The room spun until I forced my breath to slow. A nurse appeared beside me, adjusting something on my IV. "Good morning, Evelyn. You're safe. You're at St. Clair Medical. You were brought in last night. Safe." The word floated somewhere between comfort and disbelief. The door clicked softly. Rowan stepped inside, still in the same navy suit from the Christmas dinner, though the collar was rumpled and his sleeves were pushed up to his forearms. He looked like he hadn't slept, but when his eyes met mine, something steady snapped into place. "Hey," he said quietly. "How are you feeling?" "Like I fell through a glass window," I murmured. He huffed a quiet breath, not quite a laugh, more an acknowledgement of the truth. "I spoke to the ER team. No new damage to your spine. Bruised ribs, several cuts, likely a concussion. Painful, but manageable." I exhaled a shaky breath. Thank God. His expression darkened slightly. That fall shouldn't have happened. Before I could respond, he pulled a chair closer and sat beside me. His voice lowered. "Evelyn." The EMTs noted this as a suspected assault, and I backed that statement. I told them exactly what I saw. My heart lurched. "You did?" "Yes," he said simply. "Because the truth matters, and because what your sister did was dangerous. Dangerous. No one in my family would ever use that word. They'd call it a misunderstanding, an accident, an overreaction." Rowan's next words slid into the room like a crack of cold air. "There's another thing. When I reviewed your intake chart, I noticed inconsistencies with your old accident file." A tremor ran down my spine. What inconsistencies? He hesitated for the first time all morning, choosing his words carefully. Your toxicology report from 18 months ago lists you as having elevated alcohol levels. But today's labs show your body processes alcohol like someone who rarely, if ever, drinks. Your markers don't match the charted history. My breath caught. I've never been a drinker. I told them that after the crash. I believe you, Rowan said, which is why I'm concerned. A knock interrupted him. My mother swept into the room before I could speak, her perfume flooding the sterile air. My father strode in behind her, jaw set like stone. Oh, thank God, my mother cried dramatically, clasping her hands over her chest. Evelyn, darling, how do you feel? I stared at her. Sore, tired. My father stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. We need to talk, now. Rowan didn't move. She's recovering. Whatever this is can wait. My father glared at him. This is family business. Rowan's expression didn't change. She isn't alone. Mother clucked her tongue, her voice cracking just enough to sound fragile. Sweetheart, we know you're confused. Trauma can do that. But you mustn't say things you'll regret. I swallowed. Say what? That Alyssa pushed you, my father snapped. It was a misunderstanding. You slipped. You know how your chair can catch on corners. I stared at him, stunned by the speed at which he rewrote reality. Dad! She shoved me. In front of everyone. That's not what happened. Mother insisted, stepping closer. You don't want to ruin your sister's life over this. Ruin. As if her actions hadn't nearly shattered mine. Rowan stood. Mr. Hart. Mrs. Hart, your daughter doesn't owe you silence. Father's eyes flared. Stay out of this. No, Rowan said evenly. This time she doesn't have to face it alone. An officer stepped into the doorway. The timing was almost poetic. We're here for a follow-up statement, he said, holding a clipboard. Is now a good time? My parents stiffened. My father leaned over the bed, lowering his voice to a whisper. Meant only for me. Do not exaggerate. Do not accuse Alyssa. We cannot afford a scandal. My mother clasped my arm, squeezing hard. Please, Evelyn, think of the family. I closed my eyes for a single breath, letting the weight of their words settle like chains. Then I opened them and looked at the officer. I'm ready. The paramedic's statement echoed in my mind. Rowan's unwavering presence steadied me. My parents hovered like shadows. The officer asked gently, Did your sister push you? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She pushed me. Hard. On purpose. My mother gasped. My father swore under his breath. Rowan exhaled quietly. The officer nodded and wrote it down. When he finished, my parents rushed forward again, frantic. My mother's voice broke into sobs. Evelyn, what are you doing? Think about your sister. Think about us. For the first time, I felt something stronger than guilt, stronger than fear. Anger. You never think about me, I said. Not once. They froze. The officer stepped aside to let them pass, but Rowan blocked the exit, slightly forcing them to edge around him. My father muttered something venomous as he brushed by, but Rowan didn't flinch. When the room finally fell quiet, Rowan sat beside me again. You did the right thing. I stared at the door long after it closed. If speaking the truth ruins everything, maybe everything needed to be ruined. Rowan didn't smile, but something softened in his eyes. For the first time in years, I felt the world tilt, not from pain or fear, but from the startling shift of standing up for myself while sitting down. And I wasn't done yet. I barely slept. Dawn crept through the blinds in pale strips, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of the previous night. The shove, the crash of crystal, my parents' silence. Rowan's voice cutting through the chaos like steel, and then his words about my medical file. Something didn't add up. Something had never added up. A soft knock tapped at the door. Rowan stepped inside, holding a thick folder, his expression tight. "Morning," he said quietly. "I have the documents." My pulse quickened. All of them. He nodded and pulled a small rolling tray beside my bed. When he opened the folder, papers spilled out like the wreckage of a secret finally being unearthed. "Evelyn, some things in your accident file don't make sense. And now we have proof." My stomach rolled. He spread the documents across the tray. The admission form trauma notes, toxicology results insurance statements. All the pieces of a story I'd been told to believe. Rowan tapped the first page. "This handwriting is supposedly from the same nurse who completed this one." He lifted another sheet. Different style. Different pressure. Different slant. I swallowed. Maybe she just wrote fast. "She didn't," he said, "because we checked her actual documented handwriting from unrelated cases. This doesn't match." My fingers curled into the blanket. A cold, creeping dread spread through my limbs. He continued. "Here's the toxicology report. It says your blood alcohol level was elevated." He paused, then added quietly, "But the timestamp shows it was drawn before you even arrived at the ER." "That's impossible." A tremor moved through my chest. They said I was reckless, that I drank before driving." "You didn't," Rowan said. "Your labs today contradict that entirely." I stared at the lines of text, the chain of signatures, the forged fragments of my own history. 18 months of guilt crashed over me in a wave so forceful it stole my breath. And then Rowan pulled out one more sheet. "There's a missing page." I blinked at the gap between page numbers. "Page 3 is gone. It should contain your direct patient statement, the one you supposedly gave the night of the accident, the one where you admitted to driving." My heart pounded. I barely remember anything from that night. He nodded gently. "Which made you easy to manipulate." Images flickered in my mind. Snowfall, spinning headlights cold seeping into my bones, and a woman's voice faint and sharp. "Don't tell anyone she was driving. We'll handle this." I pressed my hand to my forehead. Why would they lie? Because they had something to lose, Rowan said. Or someone to protect. Before I could respond, a frantic knock rattled the door. My parents swept in like a storm front. Mother wringing her hands. Father pale and tight-jawed. "Oh, sweetheart." Mother began not noticing the folder. "We're so worried about you. We hardly slept." Rowan didn't move the documents. He simply stood by the tray, guarding them like a shield. Father's gaze landed on the papers. His voice dropped several degrees. "Why are you looking at those?" "Because they're mine," I said. Mother rushed to my bedside. "Evelyn, darling, you shouldn't reopen old wounds. It's upsetting you." "Let's focus on healing." Father glared at Rowan. "You had no right to obtain those without our consent. They belong to Evelyn," Rowan said calmly. "She gave consent." My father's jaw flexed. "We need to speak privately. Now." "No," I whispered. "Not unless he stays." Mother's eyes widened, hurt flickering across her face. But it was a practiced hurt, one designed to pull me back under her control. "Evelyn," Father said tightly, "you're making a mistake. You don't understand what you're risking." "What am I risking?" I asked. "Tell me." Silence. Then Mother broke, tears spilling with suspicious convenience. "We did what we thought was best for the family." Family. The word hit me like a blow. Father exhaled sharply. "Your sister was fragile after the crash. One accusation and her life would have been destroyed. We couldn't let that happen." My pulse thudded in my ears. "So you destroyed mine instead?" Mother stepped back, covering her mouth. "We didn't destroy anything. We protected you both. By lying about everything I whispered." Father leaned closer, lowering his voice to a threat. "Stop digging, Evelyn. You have no idea how deep this goes. Rowan stepped forward. Is that a threat? Mr. Hartfather froze. Mother grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. We'll be back when you've calmed down, she said, as if I were the unreasonable one. When the door closed, Rowan released a slow breath and pulled out his phone. There's more, he said. I requested the hospital's audit log. He held out a printout. I scanned the page, eyes stopping on a highlighted line. Accessed by a heart proxy. Date 3 weeks after the accident. Purpose insurance follow-up revision. My vision blurred. Alyssa, I whispered. She accessed my file. Rowan's voice was quiet but resolute. She didn't just lie about last night. She helped rewrite the story of your accident. I pressed a shaking hand to my chest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Only one truth rang through my mind, clear and merciless. My life hadn't been stolen by chance. It had been rewritten. And the person holding the pen was my own sister. It took hours before my hands stopped shaking. Even then, the tremor under my skin refused to settle, like my body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Rowan stayed nearby, reviewing documents, making notes, contacting someone from the hospital legal department. But he never pushed me to speak before I was ready. When I finally did, my voice cracked. She didn't just lie about last night. She lied about everything. Rowan closed the folder gently. And now we prove it. Before I could respond, a soft knock came at the door. A woman in a fitted navy coat stepped in, flashing a badge. Detective Carla Moreno, Charleston PD. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the incident. My stomach nodded. Rowan shifted subtly closer to me, his presence grounding. The detective took out a notebook. We've spoken with several witnesses from the Christmas dinner. Their accounts conflict with your parents' and sister's statements. I'd like to hear from you directly. I nodded, inhaling shakily. She began with simple questions. What I remembered where I was sitting, what Alyssa said. Then she asked, Did your sister physically touch you before the fall? Yes, I said, my throat tightening. She shoved me from behind. Hard. Detective Moreno's pen paused mid-word. And did she say anything before or during the incident? I hesitated. Shame prickled my cheeks. But I forced the words out. Stop pretending. That's what she said. The detective's jaw clenched. So she accused you of faking your disability. I nodded again. She looked up. Evelyn, is there a history of emotional or physical hostility from your sister history? As if I had the luxury of summarizing years of erosion in a single sentence. Yes, I whispered. A long one. Rowan glanced at me, worry flickering across his face. Before the detective could continue, a voice erupted from the hallway. You can't just walk in there without talking to us, my mother. Detective Moreno closed her notebook calmly. I see your family is here. I'll finish this conversation shortly. My parents burst through the door, frantic and breathless. Father stepped forward, pointing at the detective. Why are you questioning our daughter without us present? Detective Moreno didn't flinch. Your daughter is 26. You don't need to be present. Mother clasped her pearls. This is being blown out of proportion. The detective raised a brow. A disabled woman being shoved into a $10,000 crystal display, resulting in multiple injuries. That's not proportion, it's crime. Mother's face flushed an ugly shade of red. She fell by accident. No, I said, my voice unexpectedly steady. I didn't. Detective Moreno snapped her notebook shut. We'll speak again later, Miss Hart. And for the record, she added, turning toward my parents, attempting to influence a victim's testimony is a felony. Do not attempt to do so again. My mother sputtered. My father's face hardened into a rigid mask. The detective left the room without another word. Silence followed, thick and dangerous. Father exhaled sharply. Do you understand what you just did? I told the truth. You accused your own sister of assault." His voice rose, cracking with fury. He tried to hide. "Do you want Alyssa arrested? Humiliated? Do you want to destroy this family?" Rowan stepped between us before I could form a response. "Her family destroyed itself when they lied about her accident." My father's eyes snapped to him. "You don't know anything about us." "I know enough," Rowan said softly. "And I know what a cover-up looks like." Mother's eyes welled with tears, real ones this time, or maybe she'd just perfected the art of making them look real. "Evelyn, don't do this. Don't let outsiders twist things. We love you. We've done everything for you." A bitter laugh scraped up my throat. "You lied to me. You pressured me. You let her rewrite the truth. That's not love." Mother reached for me. I pulled away. Rowan's phone vibrated. He checked the screen, then looked at me. "It's the hospital compliance officer. They found something." He stepped into the hall. My parents hovered awkwardly, caught between rage and some warped version of concern. When Rowan returned, his expression was darker than I'd ever seen. He set his phone down and met my eyes. "The compliance department located the missing page from your accident file." My breath stalled. "And it was removed 3 weeks after the crash," he said, "by someone using a hospital proxy login tied to your family." My father's face went white. Rowan continued, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the room. "And there's a time-stamped camera feed of that person entering the records office." My heart pounded. Who was it? Rowan didn't look at my parents when he answered. "Alyssa." Everything inside me went cold, the kind of cold that sinks into bone. Father finally broke. "You don't understand," he said, voice cracking. She panicked. She thought if the truth came out, she'd lose everything. She should have lost everything, I whispered. I did. Mother covered her mouth as a broken sound escaped. But it wasn't guilt, more like fear of exposure. I stared at the ceiling, unable to look at them. My own family had deceived me, rewritten my life, painted me as irresponsible to cover for Alyssa's selfishness. But the worst realization wasn't about the alteration. It was this. They never thought I'd be strong enough to uncover the truth. Rowan touched my hand gently. "Evelyn," he said, voice low, "are you ready to decide what happens next?" My parents leaned in, desperate, terrified. For the first time in years, I wasn't. But I would be. And when I made that choice, the entire structure of my family's lies would come crashing down, louder than shattered crystal, sharper than broken glass. The next morning, the hospital felt different. Colder, quieter, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something to break open. I woke to the soft shuffle of shoes outside my door. Voices lowered, urgent, unmistakably tense. When Rowan pushed the door open, I knew immediately something had changed. He had the look of someone carrying a truth too heavy to hold alone. "They released Alyssa on bail," he said. "She's at your parents' house." My breath caught, not from fear, but from the familiar sting of being predictable in my family's hierarchy. "Of course she is," I said quietly. "The golden child always gets a soft landing." Rowan didn't disagree. Instead, he placed a sealed envelope on my blanket. "This came for you. Courier delivered. No return address." My pulse quickened. I peeled it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a single sheet of thick stationery. The handwriting was unmistakably Alyssa's sharp looping, pretty enough to pass for innocence. "Stop lying. Take back what you said. Fix this. Or I will." No signature. She didn't need one. Rowan read it over my shoulder, his jaw clenching. "That's intimidation." "It's Alyssa," I corrected. "Same thing." Before I could fold the letter away, Rowan pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. "This goes straight to the detective. She needs to know your sister is attempting to coerce you." The idea of Alyssa facing even more consequences should have felt satisfying. Instead, all I felt was an old, tired ache, the ache of knowing she was still playing by the same rules, assuming I'd fold under pressure just like always. A nurse entered with my physical therapist trailing behind her. "Good morning, Evelyn." Up for a little movement, Rowan stepped back but didn't leave. I lifted my arms weakly as the therapist helped pivot me to the edge of the bed. My ribs screamed in protest, my palms throbbed from the stitches. The room spun, but I steadied my breath. "This is going to hurt," the therapist warned gently. "I'm used to that," I murmured. We worked slowly. One shift of weight, one tiny slide. Every inch was fire. But when my hand finally gripped the wheelchair rim and I lowered myself into the seat, a tremor of pride moved through me. Rowan noticed. "You did that," he said softly. "Not them, not their lies. You." I blinked fast, suddenly grateful he wasn't the type to look away when things got difficult. An hour later, Detective Moreno arrived. She pulled up a chair across from me, flipping open her notebook. "Evelyn, I need to inform you officially, the investigation into your Christmas dinner assault is now part of a larger inquiry. Evidence suggests prior medical record tampering. My parents' nightmare was becoming reality." The detective continued. "The hospital's audit logs show your sister accessed your file without authorization. That's a felony on its own. Combined with evidence of altered toxicology, this may extend to insurance fraud." Insurance fraud. The words echoed off the walls like a verdict. I felt dizzy. My parents, did they know? The detective hesitated. "We're still investigating. But someone else accessed your file a week after your sister did, someone using a proxy login tied to your father's insurance company credentials." My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. He wouldn't." But the truth loomed unmistakable. He would. He did. Detective Moreno closed her notebook gently. "I know this is a lot. I also need to ask something difficult. Are you willing to provide a statement about the weeks after your accident? Anything unusual you remember?" Conversations, pressure, inconsistencies. Pressure. The word unlocked a memory I thought I'd buried. My hospital room 18 months ago. My mother's clipped voice. "You must stop saying she was driving. People will think you're confused." My father's whisper. "If Alyssa loses her license, she loses her future. You don't want that on your conscience, the fog of painkillers making everything feel unreal. And me, choking down the truth because the alternative was losing the only family I had left." Tears blurred my vision now, but I didn't wipe them away. "Yes," I said hoarsely. "I'll give a statement." The detective nodded. "We'll proceed carefully. Your safety comes first." After she left, Rowan sat beside me. His silence wasn't empty, it was protective, steady. He waited until I finally spoke. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. "How do I testify against the people who raised me?" "You don't testify against them," he said gently. "You testify for yourself." I shook my head. "It feels like betrayal." "It's the opposite," he said. "The betrayal already happened. You're telling the truth so you can finally live." I looked at him. Really looked. "Why are you helping me this much?" He held my gaze steady and unflinching. "Because I've seen what happens when lies go unchecked. And because you deserve someone who stands up for you." I swallowed hard. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated. A barrage of texts lit the screen. "Call me now. Mom. Don't talk to police. Dad. Fix this before it's too late. Alyssa. Everything is falling apart. Mom. Evie. Answer me. Dad." Rowan saw the messages and gently turned the phone face down. "You don't owe them instant access to your pain." "I don't know who I am without them," I whispered. "Yes, you do," he said. "You just forgot." His words hit deeper than he knew. I stared at my stitched hands, at the bruises blooming across my skin. My body looked like a battleground, and maybe that was fitting, because the war they'd asked me to fight in silence was finally coming to an end, and this time, I wasn't the one who would break. The following afternoon, Detective Moreno returned with someone I didn't recognize. A man in a charcoal suit carrying a slim leather briefcase stepped into my hospital room with a composed, neutral expression. His presence alone tightened the air. "This is Assistant District Attorney Lewis," the detective said. "He's overseeing the case." ADA Lewis offered a firm but gentle nod. "Ms. Hart, I appreciate you meeting with me. I know the last 48 hours have been overwhelming. Overwhelming didn't begin to describe it. My life had cracked open like a fault line, exposing everything I'd buried." I nodded stiffly. He continued, pulling a chair closer to my bedside. "I have reviewed the preliminary findings regarding your injury, the witnesses from the Christmas incident, and the concerning details about your previous accident. Before proceeding further, I need to hear directly from you." Rowan remained at my side, arms crossed, his presence, grounding but silent. The ADA opened his briefcase. "First, I want to ask about the night of your original crash. Do you recall who was driving?" My heart thudded painfully. The question had waited 18 months for an answer. "Alyssa," I whispered. "She was driving. I told my parents. They told me not to say anything again." He wrote something down. "Did they ask you to lie?" "They asked me to protect her," I said. "To take responsibility so she wouldn't face charges. They said her future depended on me." ADA. Lewis nodded slowly, his jaw tightening in a way that betrayed his calm facade. "And the toxicology, I was sober," I said firmly. "I've always been sober. My parents told me the report couldn't be changed. But it shouldn't have existed in the first place." He paused, then leaned in slightly. "Your file shows clear signs of tampering. We are pursuing charges for that. But the Christmas incident elevates everything. Your sister's assault combined with your parents' role in covering the original accident presents a serious pattern." My chest constricted. Pattern. The word felt heavy, like a verdict. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on you," ADA Lewis said. "We can pursue full charges. Your sister could face felony assault with aggravated circumstances. Your parents may face charges related to fraud and tampering with medical documents. Alternatively," he hesitated, "there may be room for negotiation. A plea deal. Restitution. A limited sentence. Restitution." My breath caught. My wheelchair, my medical bills, years of debt and struggle, everything I'd carried alone could finally be acknowledged. "What would restitution include?" I asked carefully. "We estimate your medical losses, therapy costs, lost wages and damages for emotional harm at approximately $250,000. Potentially more." My stomach twisted. "They'll never agree to that." Rowan's voice cut in quiet, steady. "They might if the alternative is prison." I blinked at him. "That's a lot of money." "It's the cost of what they took from you," he said. The ADA closed his folder. "You don't need to decide today, but I will say this: your testimony carries weight. If you want justice, we'll fight for it. If you want leniency, we'll consider it. What matters is that the choice is yours, not theirs." For the first time in years, the choice really was mine. After they left, the room fell silent. Rowan exhaled slowly and sat beside me. "How are you feeling?" I stared at the window, watching a bird land on the ledge, its feathers dusted with snow. "I don't know," I said softly. "Angry, relieved, sad, all at once." "That makes sense." "I never wanted to punish them," I admitted. "I just wanted them to see me. Believe me." Rowan leaned forward slightly. "Evelyn, they didn't make a mistake. They made a decision. Over and over." A sharp knock interrupted us. Before I could answer, the door burst open. My parents stormed inside, their expressions, frantic desperation bleeding through every movement. Mother's eyes were red. Father's tie was crooked, something I'd never seen in my life. "Evelyn," he said, his voice breaking, "for the first time we need to talk. Please." Rowan rose immediately. "She's not alone. Say what you came to say." My father swallowed hard. "The prosecutor contacted us. They're talking about charges, prison, financial penalties. We need you to reconsider." My mother stepped forward, hands trembling. "Baby, please. You're tearing this family apart. Your sister is distraught. She's not eating. She's barely speaking." Guilt slipped in like a needle. But then I remembered Alyssa's letter. "Fix this, or I will." I straightened my back. She should have thought of that before shoving me. Father's shoulders sagged. "We can't afford restitution. If you do this, we lose everything. Our retirement, the house, your mother's health insurance." My breath hitched, but Rowan spoke before I could. "She already lost everything once. You didn't care then." Mother's voice pitched high. "We did what we had to do." "No," I said louder than I expected. "You did what benefited Alyssa, and hurt me." They stared at me, truly stared, as if seeing a stranger. Father sank into the chair opposite me, defeated. "What do you want from us?" Rowan's hand found mine under the blanket. Not guiding, steadying. What did I want? I didn't want revenge for its own sake. I didn't want to watch them crumble. But I wanted truth, and accountability, and the kind of justice that didn't require me to erase myself anymore. I met my father's eyes. "I want you to admit what you did. All of it. To the prosecutor, to the detective, to me." Silence filled the room. Mother's lips parted. Father's breath trembled. Neither spoke. And there, in that aching silence, I finally understood. They weren't asking to save the family. They were asking me to save the illusion. "I'll make my decision tomorrow," I said quietly, "after I've thought it through." They left the room, slowly hollow shadows of the people I once tried to please. When the door clicked shut, Rowan squeezed my hand, once firm, warm, grounding. "You're not breaking Evelyn," he said. "You're rebuilding." And for the first time, I believed him. The next morning, my room filled with winter light, thin, cold, and unforgiving. It cast long shadows across the floor, the kind that reminded me of early mornings after the first accident, when the world felt too bright and too sharp. I lay awake before anyone entered, staring at the faint frost on the window, letting the truth settle in my bones. Today, I would decide the fate of my family. When the door opened, I expected Rowan, maybe a nurse. Instead, a familiar figure stepped in, my grandmother. Her presence hit me like a soft blow. I hadn't seen her since before the crash. My parents had quietly kept her at a distance, claiming travel would be too stressful for someone her age. But she walked toward me now with steady grace, snowflakes melting in her silver hair. "Oh, my girl," she whispered, her voice cracking as she cupped my uninjured cheek. "You've been carrying storms they should have sheltered you from." My throat tightened. "Grandma, how did you find out?" She gave a small, humorless smile. "Your mother forgets I know how to use the internet. One search for Christmas dinner assault, and there you were." I swallowed hard. Shame, relief, love, all tangled together. She pulled a chair close and sat with deliberate poise. "Tell me everything." And I did. Not the sanitized summaries I used to give to keep peace. Not the defensive explanations or apologetic tones. I told her the truth, from the first shove into the crystal candles to the missing medical records, to the way my parents stood in the doorway demanding silence instead of offering comfort. Her expression hardened with each detail, her fingers gripping her cane until her knuckles whitened. When I finished, her eyes shimmered, but not with helplessness. With fury. "They did this," she murmured. "Not life, not fate. They chose this path and dragged you down it. I felt something inside me loosen a knot that had been pulled tight for far too long. Before she could say more, a knock sounded. Rowan entered, his expression lifting slightly at the sight of my grandmother. "You must be Mrs. Hawthorne," he said. "Evelyn spoke of you." She nodded politely. "And you must be the one standing between her and the wolves." He glanced at me, cheeks warming slightly. "I'm just making sure she has what she needs." Grandma patted his arm. "Then you're doing more than her parents ever have." A faint flush rose on his cheek. I could have sworn he avoided my eyes. "Ada." "Louis is ready whenever you are," Rowan said gently. "But we don't have to decide this minute." I looked at my grandmother. "I'm scared," I admitted, of what she asked. "Losing them." "You never had them, sweetheart. All you had was the job they assigned you. Keep the family afloat while they weighed you down." Her words hit like truth forged in iron. She reached for my hand. "Justice isn't vengeance, it's restoration. Take back what's yours." I nodded slowly. "Okay." Rowan exhaled softly, as if he'd been holding that breath for hours. He and my grandmother stepped out to call the ADA, leaving me alone for a moment. I looked out the window. Snow was falling again, slow, steady flakes drifting past the glass. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped inside my body. I felt anchored inside my own decisions. When Ada Lewis arrived, he entered with a laptop, a recorder, and a solemn expression. Elena, a victim advocacy counselor, followed behind him, a woman with warm eyes and a calm presence. She sat beside my bed with a comforting nod. Lewis began. "Evelyn, before we proceed, I need to be sure. Do you want to move forward with full charges? That includes your sister for assault and your parents for criminal negligence and document tampering." I looked at each face in the room, Lewis focused and patient. Elena steady and reassuring. Rowan standing behind them like an unspoken promise. My grandmother fierce and protective. "I want what's fair," I said. "What's right." Lewis nodded. "Then let's begin." We spent over an hour gathering my full testimony. Elena occasionally placed her hand over mine when my breathing hitched. Rowan stood quietly at the foot of the bed, offering silent support whenever my resolve wavered. I detailed the night of the first accident with painful clarity, the icy road, the headlights blurring Alyssa's frantic voice arguing with someone on the phone the moment the car swerved. Then waking in the hospital, my parents' rehearsed insistence that I must have been confused. The pen in Lewis's hand paused several times, as if restraining the urge to push harder. When I finished, he closed the folder. "This is enough to move forward. We'll pursue charges. And Evelyn, your testimony will carry weight. It shows a pattern of coercion and manipulation." My grandmother exhaled a trembling breath, wiping her eyes. Rowan stepped closer. "You did it." But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted, hollow, like I'd just ripped out roots that had grown twisted through my entire childhood. "Will they go to prison?" I whispered. Lewis hesitated. "Your sister likely will. Your parents, possibly. But that is not your burden to carry anymore." When they left the room, Rowan lingered. He moved the chair closer to me, his voice low. "How are you doing?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I feel free and shattered. Both." "That's what healing feels like," he said. "Freedom doesn't arrive gently. It takes something with it." Silence settled between us, soft and fragile. He didn't touch my hand this time. He waited, and somehow that made me trust him even more. "Thank you," I said, "for being here, for not letting me face this alone." He gave a faint, rueful smile. "You've been alone for a long time, Evelyn. I'm just helping you remember you shouldn't be." Something warm unfurled in my chest, unexpected, unfamiliar, but welcome. A nurse entered, then announcing visiting hours were over. Rowan stood giving me one last steady look before heading to the door. "We're almost through the worst of it," he said softly. But as the door clicked shut, I knew the worst wasn't over. The trial was coming, and my family had not yet begun to fight back. The day of the hearing arrived with an icy wind that rattled the hospital windows. I wasn't discharged yet, but ADA Lewis arranged for me to attend via secure video. A nurse wheeled the monitor to face me, adjusting the angle so I could see the courtroom clearly. My palms were damp, my ribs still ached. But something steadier pulsed beneath all of it, a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. Rowan stood beside me, hands loosely clasped, shoulders squared like he was bracing for impact. My grandmother sat on the other side, her gloved fingers wrapped around mine. When the screen flickered to life, the courtroom came into focus. The judge sat at the bench, stern and unreadable. Attorneys filled the tables. Spectators watched from the back row. And then the camera panned slightly, revealing Alyssa. She looked thinner, her hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes hollow in a way I'd never seen. For a moment, something almost like grief stirred in my chest. Almost. My parents sat directly behind her, pale and tight-lipped. My mother's mascara clung to her lashes like brittle icicles. My father's jaw worked as if he were chewing the last remnants of pride. The bailiff called the case. State of South Carolina versus Alyssa Hart. Alyssa rose shakily. Her attorney addressed the judge. "Your Honor, the defendant wishes to enter a plea." I froze. Rowan stiffened beside me. The judge glanced down at the paperwork. "Ms. Hart, how do you plead to the charge of aggravated assault with enhancement for injury to a disabled person?" Alyssa's voice cracked. "Guilty." The word echoed in my hospital room like a bell struck underwater. Warped, heavy, unmistakable. My mother began to sob silently behind her. My father leaned forward, whispering something furious in her ear. The judge continued. "Do you understand that by pleading guilty you waive your right to trial and accept the agreed-upon sentence?" Alyssa nodded, chin trembling. "Yes, Your Honor." The prosecutor stepped forward. "The state recommends a sentence of 2 years incarceration with eligibility for parole after 14 months contingent on behavior and completion of mandatory counseling." 2 years. A life-changing sentence, yet also merciful compared to the maximum. I felt my pulse thrum in my throat. The restitution agreement followed my medical costs, my future care compensation for emotional damage, $250,000. Money my parents had fought, begged, and threatened to avoid. The judge reviewed everything slowly. Finally, he spoke. "Sentence is hereby imposed. Ms. Hart will begin her term immediately." Court adjourned. The sound of the gavel struck the room like thunder. Alyssa sagged as officers approached her. For the first time, she looked at the camera, looked at me. There was no venom there, no superiority, just regret. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply held her gaze until she looked away. As she was handcuffed and escorted out, my mother reached for her, but the officer stepped between them. My father slumped back against the bench, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Then the screen went dark. For a long moment, no one in my room spoke. It was Grandma who broke the silence. She squeezed my hand gently. "It's over, sweetheart." But I shook my head. "No, it's beginning." Rowan moved to stand in front of me. "How do you feel I searched myself?" The fear was gone. The guilt was gone. Even the anger had softened into something steadier clarity. "I feel free," I said. "For the first time in years, I feel like this is my life again." He nodded, eyes warm. "You fought for it." We spent the next hour completing discharge paperwork. My new apartment, a fully accessible unit arranged through a local trust fund, would be ready by the weekend. My grandmother insisted she'd help me move in. Rowan offered to drive. As the nurse rolled my chair toward the exit, I glanced back at the empty hospital room. Just yesterday, it had felt like a cage. Now it felt like the starting line. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a baptism. Rowan helped lift me into his car with gentle, careful movements. Grandma hummed softly beside us, and for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was bracing for possibility. When we arrived at my new apartment, the building manager handed me my keys. My name was already printed on the mailbox. I ran my fingers over the label, letting the reality sink in. Inside, the living room smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. The wide doorways, the lowered counters, the soft lighting, every detail felt like a small rebellion against the life I'd been forced to live. Grandma helped set my bag on the couch. Rowan stood by the window watching snow fall over the city. "Looks like a clean slate," he said. I smiled. "It is." He turned to me, then expression gentle but sure. "Evelyn, you know you aren't alone anymore, right?" Warmth spread through me, easing into the places that had been tense for too long. "I know," I said. Grandma stepped forward, kissing my forehead. "My brave girl. You found your way home." As evening settled, they both left to give me space. I rolled toward the large window and looked out at the quiet snowfall, feeling like the world was finally exhaling with me. And then I felt it, the first real sense of peace in years. My life wasn't defined by what had been taken from me anymore. It was defined by what I had reclaimed. If you're still here, thank you for listening to my story. And if you've ever fought your way out of a place that tried to silence you, leave a comment. Tell me you made it. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me. The next chapter of life is just beginning.